Yeah, perfect.
Hi, Shannon.
Hi, how are you?
I am good, and I'm happy to have you on the show.
Yeah, this is a great way to start the week. I'm excited.
Yes, speaking about improvisation and why every facilitator has to learn improvisation to become a better facilitator. I truly believe that.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm excited to learn from you. And before we're getting there, I always kick off with the same question. When did you start calling yourself a facilitator? And actually, do you?
It's a good question because, yes, I do. I do call myself a facilitator. And I usually specify that by saying I'm an experiential facilitator. Uh, and I kind of went back and forth about using the word facilitator for a little while because I wasn't sure. I just wasn't sure how that would land and whether a name like trainer or, or consultant, right? They all have their own, they all have their own weight and they all have their own meaning depending on who you're talking to. So I don't know. I kind of went back and forth about it. And facilitator is really what resonates with me the most because I kind of consider myself somebody who creates experiences for other people to ignite their own genius. And, that might be through question asking or through running a couple of experiences and exercises. But ultimately, I'm a huge believer that we are all innately creative. We are all innately wise. We all come to the table with our own lived experiences. So I like to think of myself as a facilitator in terms of just creating the space for you to discover that about yourself,
I love that.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's funny though that I just came to realize while you were speaking that facilitation is content agnostic. And I think especially in the early days where we might think that, oh, if I call myself a trainer or a consultant, I might be able to charge higher rates because it kind of resonates with content and expert. Yeah. Whereas facilitation is really the focus on, as you say, the design of an experience. And there's an intrinsic value to that, but you need to understand and to see it that it is content agnostic and still it's of huge value.
Yeah. And I'm so glad you brought that up because it does. And it can start to, well, for me, I can't speak for everyone, but when I started to wonder whether I should think of myself as a trainer or a consultant, I think some of that was driven by my ego. Like, well, it sounds better and it's going to resonate with the higher paying client, but then it didn't align with what I was doing. And at the end of the day, I still have content. I mean, I still have my intellectual property that is part of what I do, but it's not everything I do. And so I think facilitation sort of lends itself to having some content, but as a way of guiding an experience versus me behind a podium telling you things like this one-to-many relationship, which, let's be honest, is kind of shifting anyway. This idea of educating people that way, right? Kind of is probably an understatement. Yeah. So it's much more, not only does it resonate with me personally, but I think that it's just the way of how we need to recognize people learn and how people connect with each other.
Yeah. And you mentioned that you would introduce yourself as experiential facilitator, as opposed to what? What is the other side of the coin of a facilitator?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. I guess that's a really good question. I don't know. I mean, I think it certainly plays into experiential learning and the whole practice of experiential learning. But as opposed to what is a great question, because as a, the idea of a facilitator is to do just that, is to come into a room and create experiences through learning. However, I've also seen facilitation done other ways where there's so much structure to it that it loses its soft edges. Okay. And I think maybe another way that I think about experiential is a little bit of that improv feel, like, oh, I had a design and whoa, this isn't working, or the energy in the room is different than I expected it to be, or we just got a really great question. How do we shift and pivot to take care of what's really here? And not everybody does that. You know, we're human beings. If we spend time and energy creating something and then we're asked in the moment to do something differently, it can be terrifying. And so sometimes we just hold on to the story and just force it, you know? So I don't know. That's a good question. I'm glad you asked that. It's going to give me some food for thought, but there's my long-winded answer.
Thank you for sharing your answer. And I'm going to hook on something you said. I was wondering, maybe it's process facilitation as opposed to experiential facilitation, or something that is very kind of structured, like design thinking or design sprint facilitation, which is following a very clear kind of structure that has been predefined. But I'm not sure.
I love that. I wrote down process facilitation. That I really love that, the way that sounds and the way that it sits with me. It feels true. And yeah, I mean, as far as design thinking and all of that approach is so valuable. And isn't that what's great about this line of work is there's so many different bodies of work that we can pull from and make it our own. I mean, there's psychological safety, there's design thinking, there's experiential education, there's adult learning theory. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And if we know just enough about all of those to be dangerous, so to speak, or dive in on some of them and really, you know, make them the foundation of what we do, either way is beautiful. And I think that makes this work so creative. It's like a creative process, both in the design of it and in the facilitation. Yeah. But I love what you said, process facilitation. I'm going to let that sit with me because it just sounds really beautiful. I love it.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. And now, of course, I'm super curious to hear what brought you to improv, and what was there first, improv or the facilitation, and what inspired the other in the life of Shannon?
Yeah. I'd say improv and performance in general. I mean, I'm an only child, so I had a lot of time creating my own fun and my own, keeping myself busy, to be perfectly honest, right? And so when I was a kid, a lot of that was making up plays and writing music and doing choreography and just constantly performing for my poor parents, who thankfully loved me enough to indulge me in all of that. And I kept following that. I've always loved performance and always loved writing and just the whole all of creativity and just what it does to me as a person and how it lights me up. And when I was in high school, I was in the theater program there, and it was a really pretty sophisticated theater program there, which was great. And it really lent so much to who I am today. Improv showed up for me front and center when I was a senior in high school. There's a improv school here in the Bay Area in San Francisco. It's called BATS, which stands for Bay Area Theater Sports. And when I was in high school, we had a collaboration, or I should say we had a teacher that we brought in from BATS Improv to work with us and help us create our performance. And so she taught us all about what improv is and how the interplay of improv into performance and unscripting and all of those types of kind of tenets of how powerful the art of improv is. Her name is Rebecca Stockley, and anyone who follows improv would know who that is. She's a wonderful person. She's still very involved at BATS. So that was kind of my first exposure to improv. And then, I went to college and I did all the things that you're supposed to do to become an adult. I got the degrees and followed my dad's advice to, don't not to be a performer because there's no money in it, but to go into the business direction and, all the things I'm sure a lot of your listeners can resonate with. And then, much later on, I was in a marketing job for years and years, and I decided to leave my job in 2018. And simultaneously, I went back to improv. I went back to BATS, started taking a number of classes, and really started to double down on getting back into that whole world. And because of where I was in my life at that time and still am, that's where I was like, oh, so this isn't just performance. This is life. I mean, this is life. Most people are familiar with the concept of yes and, which is, the most predominant improv rule, I guess. But there are so many others that are taught to new and ongoing improvisers, like make your partner look good, right? Yeah, and I know you've taken some improv too. So yeah, make your partner look good. Another one is see the offers, right? Like all the offers, where are they? The people in the grocery store, the way that your manager talks to you, what your child might be doing with his body gesture to indicate what he's feeling inside. Those are all offers. Anyway, and it goes on and on about all these tenets of improv that about listening and spontaneity and openness and presence and playfulness and connection and teamwork. And it's like, oh, wait a minute. Yeah, I can see how relevant this is in creating a performance, but we're performing all the time, aren't we? Whether it's on stage or in business, we are playing a role and we're interacting with one another. So that's a long answer to your question. I hope that helped.
I love the answer. So thank you for taking the time. And I could see it so clearly that in the moment where you quit your job and you start to redesign your life, and I think many of us facilitators went through this phase, right? Because nobody came out of college and said, yay, I want to be a facilitator.
Right.
And so that during this phase of finding your real purpose, it is so helpful to learn to feel confident in uncertainty. And that's basically what improv teaches you, to deal with this uncertainty. Okay, I don't know what will happen next, just like in real life, as you said. And I will look out for offers. I will yes and the offers. Yeah. And I will make my partner look good so that we'll all benefit in the end.
Exactly. And when you think about walking into a room as a facilitator, yeah, I mean, you and I just got through talking about how we have to pivot if the energy is different, or somebody throws you a curveball, or you need to stop everything and sit down to take care of somebody who's, triggered in some way, or the conversation, changes. If we hold on to our story and we grip it like crazy, then nobody's going to benefit. So it has. Yeah. And the practice is called, so when I realized that I was putting two and two together, so to speak, right. So improv is also relevant in business and life. I mean, I didn't think I was the only one, obviously, who had that realization, but I did not realize that there is an entire network, a global network of practitioners using this practice is called Applied Improv, and it's applying improv off the stage and into business and life and school and healthcare and trauma, therapy and psychology. So it was when I found my people, I'm like, oh my God, I'm home. This is it. And it's a great network of people because they're very supportive too. And some of us are facilitators, which is, even better.
So now I'm really curious to hear from you how you apply it, because from what we discussed until now, it was more on the meta level. So what's the mindset of improv that we can use in facilitation?
The mindset of improv to use in facilitation.
That's one part. And the other one is to apply improv to facilitation.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you use this art and craft?
Yeah, I would say as far as the mindset, it really comes down to openness, recognizing that change is inevitable. It always catches us off guard. And if we are present to it and we are aware that change is going to happen, and that leaning into change with curiosity versus, again, sticking to our own messaging or our own belief system, that can be a really dangerous place to be. So the mindset, I think, for me is, and every time I walk into a facilitation room, whether it be virtual or live, it's like my whole, I'm doing this with my hands. I'm like making my body bigger, because the more I can hold the space in a big way versus shrinking into myself and making sure I'm right, the better off everybody's going to be. So yeah, so I think part of it too, I think I just surprised myself by saying it's also this idea of being curious versus being right.
Yeah. And how do you bring this mindset into the room so that the participants can also adopt it? Because I think it's one part to lead by example and to know this for yourself. How explicit are you to transmit this to the room? Or is it something that they will get automatically if they just see how you apply it?
It depends. In some of the more recent sessions that I've been running, it's been pretty explicit. And it's interesting too that you asked that question, because I go back and forth, and many of us do in this line of work, applied improv being what I'm talking about with line of work, is this idea of do we use the word improv? Because some people think, oh my gosh, I want to know more. I understand it. I want to participate. And other people and other organizations and other leaders are going to say, I don't understand it. I don't know what the ROI is. It sounds too playful. How are we going to measure success?
It's not planned. You cannot just show up and improvise. Doesn't mean you don't prepare.
Right. Can I see your slide deck? I need to see your slide deck. I'm like, I have no slide deck. And not everybody's okay with that, right? So anyway, sometimes it's explicit. I will quite literally introduce myself as a trainer or a experiential facilitator who roots my work in improv, and then I talk about what those are, and then we dive into the work. And as far as how I bring it in, it's woven throughout my entire design in terms of the games. And I shouldn't say games. I do like the term games because it's playful and it has its place. I usually choose the word exercises because it, depending on the environment that I'm in, it has a little bit more of a businessy feel. But my number one rule, and I'm sure yours is too, in a session is connect early and connect often. So, the very first thing I do even before I introduce myself, is get people to share with one another in a really playful and fun way, right? Whether that be through chat or whether it's an in-person thing. And then throughout, we will, let's see, maybe we're talking about collaboration and the power of psychological safety, and how as leaders, it's important to listen with intention to each other, right? So that we can work well together. So I'll tee that up as an idea, and then I'll get people into I'll create a game, or I mean an experience where there's a little bit of role play and some sharing. And maybe we use the yes and principle to get people to make up a story together. Once upon a time, there was a little boy, right? So sometimes they're very playful and almost juvenile as a stepping stone. And then the next version of it is about, brass tacks. Okay, we played that game. It was very fun. Everybody made up a story. We were all giggling and laughing. Now let's go back into the breakout rooms. And this time, I'd like the two of you to, take your 5-year business plan and take a piece of it and see if you can yes and each other into what the next 3 months are going to look like. And just yes and yes and yes and see what you can come up with, right? Or if you're in a room, get a big oversized sticky note and just keep saying yes to each other until you have a giant list of crazy ideas that might not even be within budget or, might not even work with physics, but they're out there now. And now we have something to work with, just as a couple of examples.
Yeah. And there's so much to unpack. And I have to decide, strategic decision, which route to go down. I will take the psychological safety one.
Okay.
Because I think that's very important in both scenarios, in improv and in the context of a workshop. Because especially in this, if you start to create a new world, or if you start creating possibilities, the yes and trusting that the other one will yes and you creates the psychological safety, right? That you can dream, you can be silly, and it's going to be okay because someone will yes and you. What do you think are the building blocks for this psychological safety in improv? And what can we learn from it in facilitation? And what are maybe the misconceptions often of psychological safety, of what it actually means?
Well, when I think of, first of all, I think a huge piece of psychological safety, and this also kind of ties into one of the questions that you had asked me prior to our getting on this call this episode is what makes workshops fail, right? Mm-hmm. I know I can see you already know where I'm going with this. Psychological safety and having an event or a session or a training that, or just creating any gathering where there is psychological safety in the room, you need leadership's involvement. For them not to be in the room and to be the people who just hire the outside facilitator, walk away and assume all is well and good is a huge oversight. And all it says to the participants in the room is, why are we here and they're not? Aren't we all in this together? Isn't one of the values of our company about transparency and communication? Well, then where is she? Why isn't he in here? Right? Mm-hmm. So that's a little bit tangential, but I wanted to touch on that because the sessions that I've facilitated that don't work as well as I had hoped. And again, I'm sure I have a part to play in this too. I'm not perfect. I'm sure there's things I can always improve. And they've been the ones where the leader, the manager's not there because, when the cat's away, the mice will play. And also it just speaks volumes, I think, sometimes, whether it's intentional or not, it can speak volumes to participants that their manager or their leader's not there. And I think that that's a huge missed opportunity when it comes to establishing psychological safety. Psychological safety to me also is the huge piece of it is making mistakes and allowing for those mistakes to happen without punishment. Now, some mistakes, of course, are safety mistakes, and some mistakes cost companies, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And those aren't the mistakes I'm talking about. But just recognizing fallibility, that, let's just make something and see if we can get through this together. And if we make a mistake, so be it. Let's learn from it and keep going. It's that whole principle of design thinking, right? You have to put something out and test it. Otherwise, what are we doing here?
Yeah. And I guess that's also the safety space of improvisation, that, okay, you're improvising, there's no script. So you're there to experiment, basically. So
Yes.
translating this then to the workshop space is, okay, we're here to test it out and to improvise and to see what sticks and what doesn't. Yeah, this makes sense. And I love how you mentioned that the presence of the manager or leader in the room also impacts potential failure. And it reminds me that it's all about making time for something, taking the time, making it a priority, because at the end of the day, none of us has enough time to do everything.
Mm-hmm.
And then it really comes down to what do we say yes to and what do we say no to? And I think then the signal it sends to those participants who are actually expecting to do the work because they're going to a workshop.
Yeah.
And they're not being there, not making time for being there. It is actually quite a big thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially, improv, although it is, it can be playful and it can be theatrical, right? It can be all those things. It can also be, depending on the exercises and the way things are facilitated, it can also be vulnerable and not in a way that feels unsafe, and not in a way that feels like therapy or anything, although maybe in certain settings. But if we're being asked to join together in a room to get to know one another on a level that might be a step beyond the quote unquote water cooler style chit chat, and the leader of the room and the leader is not in the room, or the manager's not in the room, then that's a huge missed opportunity for people getting to know each other at a different level that has been facilitated with the intention of being spontaneous and built out of curiosity, versus hi, my name is, let's get to know, I have one kid, you have two kids, I live here, you live there, I'm in marketing, you're in sales. Who cares? Yeah. Let's get to I don't care. Let's get to the root of who we are as people through storytelling and other ways. And then we can really connect and collaborate with one another in a way that's going to hopefully increase sales, create new products, make our customer service and support team operate like rock stars. But if all that's happening and the leader is not in the room, it can just be a huge oversight. And sometimes it's the session's facilitated great and everybody's happy and it's just a missed opportunity. But other times, because those energies are not in the room, the rest of the session can fall a little bit flat, because we all want to feel like we're valued and that we're working for people who value us.
Yeah, and feeling heard and seen.
And feeling heard.
Literally in this case.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you see the risk of applying improv, and especially the yes and principle? If you are not a, let's say, trained applied improv practitioner. And where I'm going is it's very easy to yes and each other and to build these castles and great visions and dreams. And then you're sitting there with all the possibilities with yes and then suddenly reality kicks in. And then comes frustration. Or you have conflicts building up and you have two people who just cannot smell each other's guts. So they don't want to yes and each other and make each other feel good. So how do you then, in these both scenarios, how do you master the art?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a good question. And ultimately, I mean, there's so many parts to it because we all are, you know, we are all, I mean, each and every one of us is made up of our upbringing, our culture, the lessons that we were given as children, the things we're supposed to say and do, and the things that we should do and what we should not do. And so, yeah, it's hard when you've got, potentially, whether it be 10 people or 100 people in a room, and every single person sees themselves as an individual, which we are. And, some of us are going to hold on pretty tightly to that, no matter who we're being asked to work with or what we're being asked to do. And so I will make no claim that, a couple of sessions with me are going to, turn around conflicts that, or engagements that have been unhealthy or that don't work, whether it's a team environment or a personal environment. And I will make a case for this being a practice. This is a practice, just like mindfulness, just like yoga, just like meditation. It's a practice. And just the simple practice of taking the word but out of our vocabulary is really hard. I was in I did a training a couple weeks ago for a nonprofit organization here in the States. And my client was on the call, and she and I had talked about this beforehand. So I didn't surprise her. And I had said to her before, I'm going to run this exercise. Would you mind, demonstrating it with me? And she said, yeah, no problem. And it was a yes and exercise. And so I said to her, I forget what it was, but I said, May, and I suggested something. And she said, yes, but instead of da da da, and then without even knowing it, she was supposed to be demonstrating yes and. But her human nature just kicked in. And I said, and she was so embarrassed. And I said, no. This is a perfect teaching moment, because you just did what we all do. We just do it. We say but, and it's just our natural tendency. And so this is, I guess, I hope I'm answering your question, but so much of this is a practice. This is not a one and done. And to your first question about, you have all these big ideas, and then when the rubber meets the road, how do you put that into practice? And that's where, we are talking about these big ideas and this big out of your head. And of course, but we of course have to then find out, what's our true north? What's our agreed purpose? And actually, I think that's what a lot of it comes down to. We have to all collectively agree to our purpose. What are we doing here? Why are we doing it? What's our objective? Whether that be a 5-year plan or a shift in behavior. What are we doing? And to continue to recalibrate. When I teach, I also coach people in how to have better meetings. And, a lot of it comes down to start your meetings off by literally saying out loud to the group, let's just revisit our purpose. We are here because of da, 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 da. And if everybody can come back and agree, oh, that's right, we've agreed to this. And maybe Miriam and I don't know how to yes and each other quite yet because we have history, or we don't agree with each other, or there's a status play going on. If we can rally around what that purpose is, I think it's going to take some of the wrinkles out and make things a little bit easier.
Thank you. I love the reframing of using it as a practice. And I can imagine too that it takes a little bit of the tension out, the wrinkles, as you said. Okay, I don't expect you to support each other and be friends. But now I just ask you for 10 minutes to yes and each other. And maybe this little game exercise will help them to find empathy. Because I think being yes-anded whether we want it or not, does something to us as human beings.
Yes.
Because we literally feel heard and supported, even if it's just a game.
Yeah, exactly. And you had asked before the episode about one of my favorite exercises, and I'm happy to do this with you. But it plays in nicely, and I should caveat this by saying that this exercise doesn't fit everywhere, and when I, as I architect or as I build the workshops, right, you obviously don't start with this exercise. So this is not a starter, but midway, or when we're feeling really connected and we're ready to do the work, or maybe it's a personal development meeting or a session, because I do some of those too. Do you want me to kind of share with you how it works?
Sure.
Well, so it's called, I don't know if it's my name or everybody's name for it, but it's called the Pride Rant. Pride Rant. And the way that I tee it up is I say, we oftentimes are moving so quickly, or whether it's together as a team or individually, that we don't slow down and celebrate our successes, right? And sometimes the successes we celebrate are quote unquote mistakes or failures, right? And so basically, I'll get people into a room together and I'll time them or give them a timer. For you and I, we can just make it pretty quick just to kind of share how this goes. And the invitation is for the first person to start sharing things that they're proud of, but to do it in a really like a stream of consciousness way. And so I often give an example like this. I'm proud because I make a really good taco salad. I'm proud of the way I'm raising my children. I'm proud of the fact that I have been able to keep my plant alive all through COVID. I'm proud of the fact that I've built my business from nothing. So, or it could be, I'm proud that even though I couldn't sleep all last night because I was anxiety ridden, I woke up today with a smile, right? So whatever it is, and you just ba 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 ba, and then there's 3 reflection questions that I like to that I invite. So do you want to do this, and I'll show you what the 3 reflection questions are?
Let's do that.
Okay. Okay. Do you want to just hit me with some, and I'll kind of give you a signal with my hand when I'm ready to give you my reflection.
Yes. Okay. I am proud that after 2 hours being on hold for the customer service of my bank, I was still able to send them a friendly message to complain. I am proud that my business survived COVID. I am proud that Never Done Before is taking off and is becoming something like a brand in the facilitation world. I am proud of almost 150 episodes on the Workshops Work podcast. I'm proud that I spend every weekend time on writing the 1-page summary, although I usually don't want to. I am proud that I quit smoking. Only 3 days, but I can feel it. I'm done now. I'm proud that I made it through this exercise.
Yeah. Yay. Awesome. Awesome. Now, what I put in the chat oftentimes, I mean, obviously we're talking about virtual right now, is 3 reflections back to you. And those things that I'm going to reflect back to you are 1, what I heard you say. No, sorry. 1, what I hear matters to you. 2, what I'm curious about. 3, what I want to honor in you. So I'll reflect back to you. 1, what I heard matters to you is your work. You are beautifully tied to the work that you're sharing in the world. And then I can see it in your face when you talk about even the hard stuff, really lights you up and it matters. 2, what I'm curious about. And this comes from a past conversation, full transparency, but I'm curious about your membership group and how you support the people that you work with. So I'm really curious to know more about that and about that part of you. And three, I want to honor you seem like somebody who really decides to do something and commits to it all the way through. And I also want to honor that you're quitting smoking, which is hard and doable. And so I'm proud of you for that too.
Thank you. Thank you. And that was really a confession, because smoking these days, it's like a bad thing. That was my guilty pleasure. No, very few people actually knew that I smoked. But now that it's done, I can confess it.
Awesome.
Thank
so
you.
That's an example of if there was some tension in a room, and I'm not talking about tension like heightened. I'm not talking about heightened conflict and heightened tension, because obviously that exercise would not be suitable for that. But if it's a group of people who either don't know each other very well and need to, or that's the goal, right? Or people who are kind of like, well, I'm going to stick to what I know, and I'm going to do my thing, and no one's allowed no one's allowed to see me. That can be a really transformative one. And again, some people keep it very surface, and I always say, talk about your taco salad, talk about your tennis serve. It doesn't need to be, heart-wrenching details about your life, but it's got some connective beauty in terms of sharing stories, where it softens people's edges a little bit to say, oh my God, I'm not as different as you are. I'm not as different from you as I originally thought I was.
Yeah. And I can perfectly see this exercise working to flatten the room. So even if you have a CEO and an intern doing this exercise together, I mean, how beautiful would it be for the CEO sharing what he's proud or she is proud of, and the intern doing the same, and then acknowledging each other.
Yes. I love that. Because status that can bring down a whole thing, right? I mean, that has some real impact and can have yeah. Anyway, I love that.
We can find, our humanness together in something positive to share. And I think it's very vulnerable to share something we're proud of. Funny enough, I'm not sure whether it's the same in every culture, but at least in the Western cultures, it seems like you don't share what you're proud of. Well, you might talk about the taco salad. But,
yeah. That's a really good point. I'm a member. Well, I'm not a member yet, but I'm starting to learn about a much more global group of folks who do what I do. Well, I'm already a member of the Applied Improv Network, which is global, but there's another group of people called the Global Play Brigade. And apparently they have work. I haven't joined one yet, but I have it on my calendar. They have a series of workshops that are about all different things. And according to a gentleman I just spoke with recently, he said that it's just such a beautiful way to get in a room with people from China and people from India and people that are not on the Western side of the world who communicate in ways that I'm familiar with. Because running this exercise that you and I did, I'm going to venture to guess would be very different if you're talking to people in, any number of areas in the world where that's taboo. That's not something that we do. So that's an ongoing process for me too, is just to recognize those cultural differences and to be sensitive of them, because that could be, a very uncomfortable situation if you take it out of this scenario where you and I are sharing this way.
Absolutely. Although I recently experienced that even in the same culture and with some exercises that I would have considered as simple, almost naive, you can trigger some traumata in the group. And it might have a bigger impact. And then asking for something like, what are you proud of? And having someone who says, well, maybe who suffers depression and therefore isn't proud of anything. And then suddenly a kind of playful exercise can feel like a drop bomb.
Yeah. That's so true. That's so true. Which is what makes our job, I mean, yours and my job, both invigorating and enlightening and really hard, because we don't know what's in the room, right? And so there has to be, and I'm not giving us a pat on the back by any stretch. I'm just recognizing that there's immense capacity that needs to be a part of this work, because the world is a very complicated place. People are complicated. And so presuming that my idea of joy is your idea of joy is not only short-sighted, but it's naive, and it can get us into trouble. Thank you for bringing that up, because that's so true. I remember recently I was on a call. It was a different type of workshop. And I said to this group of people, I said, I always choose joy. I said, I choose joy. And I forget what I was saying, and I said, but I said it as if everybody chose joy. Well, this woman in the room said, I just have to let you know that I get a tightness in my whole body and my throat when I think about the first emotion in, when she thinks about approaching the world through joy, it quite literally gave her like an anxiety, like a minor anxiety attack, because she had triggers potentially of somebody squashing her joy or telling her that she was taking life too frivolously, or I don't know, it could have been 1,000 things, but that never would occur to me, or it never would have occurred to me. And now it was enlightening for me to recognize, oh my God, my truth is not, my truth is my truth, and full stop.
What a good reminder. And we talked about psychological safety before. I think this is the sign, and it's actually a huge compliment for you as a facilitator, that someone in the group has the courage and feels safe enough to actually speak up and say that.
Yeah. Yes, you're right.
How did you act to that?
My dog is making funny noises in the background. I wasn't sure if Mike was picking it up. I just reacted to it with gratitude. And my own quiet curiosity, but not in an external way. I didn't ask her questions about why she came to that. I mean, that's not my place, but I just reacted with gratitude, because to your point, thank you for saying that. Thank you for sort of putting a spotlight on something that I was being short-sighted about. I had my blinders on, right? And God knows, especially in this day and age where we are at a point of global reckoning when it comes to belonging and inclusivity, to walk around thinking that our truth is our only truth, especially when we're responsible for creating safe spaces for other people. Like it comes back to practice, doesn't it? It comes back to practicing this level of awareness.
Yeah. And that sometimes it can be so easy to, at least for myself, I can only speak for myself, to be taken away with this concept of, okay, I need to host myself. So I need to get into this place where I can share my joy and my energy with the group, because that's what I'm there for. And then if suddenly something comes up that is totally not aligned, I can relate to that. I'm in this space where I motivated myself. I'm there for the group. I want to bring energy into the space, and then I'm full of joy. And then I might just not realize that someone else joined the session from a different place, from trauma, anxiety.
Yeah. And that, may I ask you a question? I know this is of the work that you do. How much of it is, corporate, where you're being hired by somebody and then other people they didn't sign up, right? They were kind of told that they should be there and it's part of the curriculum or whatever. How does that work for you? Because sometimes I can find that challenging too, that those people are like, oh, I got to go to this thing, or I don't understand the value until I get there. It can lead to disengagement.
Yeah. So I used to do only those, and now it shifted, especially with NDB. But funny enough, I now just realized that actually I sometimes even prefer those because participants arrive without expectations. And I think from my facilitation style, I'm rather this, okay, let's bring joy and energy in it and do some things that surprise the group. And also I totally acknowledge that they don't want to be there. And I started, it was actually from one of the of my podcast guests that I learned this, and I love it. To start a session with, okay, I know that some of you don't want to be here. Okay, so here, let's have two sides in the room. Those who are actually looking forward to be here, you stand there, and those who don't want to be here, go and stand there. And then I would stand where those are supposed to go who don't want to be there, to give them permission. And then once they just, voted with their feet and see that it's okay to say, I don't want to be here, it totally changed the dynamics.
I love that. I love that. Do you find that people do go over to that side?
If I go, they go.
They'll go, yeah.
Yeah. Because then it's it's safe for them to stand with me. And those who are really looking forward, they can stand by themselves. And then I usually tell them, okay, give me the first hour. If you have the impression that it's a waste of your time, you're all adults. Leave.
Yeah.
And this then sparks FOMO and curiosity.
Genius. Oh, I love that. I'm gonna politely borrow that from you because I think that's really, really good idea.
I learned it from someone else. That's how we learn.
Right.
It's beautiful.
Right. It's like that book, Steal Like an Artist, right? We're all artists. We're just taking things from one another and creating our own things.
Yeah. And that's what creativity is, connecting information in a new way.
Absolutely.
It's not reinventing the wheel altogether.
Yeah.
And I'm going to slightly change the topic now, but Enliven is the name of your company. And now I'm even more curious after hearing so much of the work you're doing and the energy you bring into them. What is the meaning behind Enlivened?
So it's funny. I was thinking about this, and somebody asked me this recently. I cannot remember. I don't have like a moment in my memory where I sat down and said, "I've got it." I think, and I don't want to sound too like woo, but I kind of think it came to me. Part of it though was, part of it was that I was working with a coach who gave me some very wise advice about determining a word or an idea that I could really believe in. And when I came to that feeling, everything was aligned. And if I was off from that feeling, everything was a little misaligned. And so I came up with this word, aliveness or alive. And that was sort of the beginning of it, that, when I feel really alive, like I can feel it in my body, and what it means to me may not be what it means to other people, but aliveness was this idea, this feeling alive. And then enlivened was sort of spurned from that. Right after that, I learned about a Howard Thurman quote. Howard Thurman is a theologian and a spiritual teacher who was way ahead of his time back in the early 1900s here in the States. And he has a quote that I use all the time in my workshops, and it goes like this. Don't ask what the world needs. Ask what makes you come alive and then go do it. Because what the world needs is people who have come alive. And I love it because it says so many things about don't subscribe to other people's narratives and create your own version of what makes you, you, and it had all this stuff that stirred up in me. And so I don't know, between the coach and this idea of aliveness and enliven, it all kind of came together to be Enliven Studios. And I use the word aliveness, and I created something called the Aliveness scaffolding. Mm-hmm. It's an acronym. I mean, it's simple, but it takes many of the tenets of improv into a structure that I teach around. And the Aliveness scaffolding goes like this. And I call these 9 conscious leadership skills: awareness, listening, interdependence, vulnerability, engagement, non-judgment, embrace change, start anywhere, and say yes.
Beautiful.
So those are all sort of intertwined. And I wish I could say, oh, well, there was a day where I had wrote some things down and I had a branding coach or something, but I didn't have any of that stuff. It just kind of all interplayed with one another to this place that took me here.
Nice. And that's, again, back to where we started, is accept the offers, accept all offers and find them. Go and find the offers.
Yeah, exactly.
And yeah, that relates to improv as much as to facilitation, as much to entrepreneurship.
Oh, yeah. Yes, especially to entrepreneurship, which can be really hard. I mean, you know this. Yeah, I mean, entrepreneurship is new to me because I was in corporate for so long, and it's man, it is a beautiful unfolding of self and business and people and lessons and all of it. And there are some days where I just want to tear my hair out because I'm like, what am I doing? Right? But ultimately, if I come back to that aliveness, it all makes sense. It just makes sense for me.
Yeah. And I can definitely relate to it and to the quote. Don't ask the world what they need. Nobody knows what we need anyway. And I think it can be quite controversial to state that about a room of participants. Don't ask them what they need.
Yeah, that's so true.
And maybe there's still truth to that. Because if you ask them what they need, they might not know. So how can we create experiences for them to come up with what they need without asking them, thinking out loud? But I think there's something to it.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of it is unhooking from story, Sometimes depending on the context, I'll run a workshop where we spend half of the workshop really getting into our stories and telling our stories and creating our stories. And then the second half of the workshop is all about throwing them away. Right? Because if we act as if we have a script, which we don't, then how are we going to see other people? And how are we going to hear what they have to say? And how are we going to co-create together? And how are we going to wonder about things if all we're doing is sticking to our own script?
Yes. Yes. And the same relates to, it's something that I often say, that workshops work best, I believe, if you have a script and an agenda and then you throw it away. So you know what you have to do, then you throw it away. Because then you can really be in the moment. I do the same with a podcast. as you know, I send you sample questions and then I don't ask them. So I do have a script. So do I. And then we can be in the moment. We have this illusion of control. Okay, we know what's going to happen. And then we listen and see what else may happen.
I'm writing that down. Illusion of control. That's beautiful. And sometimes it's a disillusion, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah, I learned it from the pandemic, right?
Oh, goodness. Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, I think another reason Enlivened, I think, really resonates with me is it goes back to that first thing we were talking about today is I'm not here to teach you how to be a better listener. I'm not here to teach you how to be, you know, a good team member. I will create an experience that will invite you into learning things about yourself and your teammates that you may not have known. And I use this kind of I don't know if it's silly or I just use this very playful wording in my marketing, which is enliven up. So enliven, but then like enliven up. Let's enliven up. You know, it's sort of like lighten up, but it's enliven up. And it's this idea of like, let's enliven up this time with one another. Like, I want to enliven in you your truth, what it means to be you. I want to enliven creativity if that's where we go. Or maybe maybe enlivening with you is something much more pragmatic where it's, you know, it has straight lines and hard edges. Great. Let's bring that. It's an offer.
I like that. Especially because it might be different because I'm not a mother tongue speaker, but enliven really sounds like, or to me, gives me the impression of rather introspection, reflection, and enliven up brings this outwards.
Yeah, I guess you're right. I always put an exclamation point at the end too, because it has that like a little bit of levity, like a pop of energy. Yeah.
Yeah. And it gives permission to just share. How do we learn to listen? You just mentioned that. I cannot teach someone to become a better listener, but maybe you can. Or what is the experience you would create that would make someone a better listener?
Well, the game that we just played is a good example, right? I mean, how can you reflect back to me those 3 prompts if you were not listening? And listening at a level, you're listening from your heart too, right? Because you were sharing some things about yourself that I didn't know and that you may not tell everybody. And well, you just did because we're on a podcast. But you know what I mean? So that's a good example. Oh man, there are so many exercises around listening. I mean, yes, and activities are all about listening. Curiosity, right, is in my opinion, it is also about listening. Because let's see, we are so hardwired to listen in order to speak, right? Okay, as long as she's almost done. And when she's done, I'm going to say the thing that matters to me most. And because it's going to elevate my status and it's going to make me seem like I'm participating and it's a way for me to share my ideas. But if instead we can slow that down to say, oh my God, wait, she just said something. And now what I was going to say isn't even relevant anymore. How can I ask her a question instead of forcing myself into the story that, or giving advice? I think giving advice is another way of not listening. And it can be a really big play of ego. I know more than you do. So, but there are lots of exercises around around listening and awareness. And you think about improv. I mean, two people standing on a stage with no plan. One person might say something or do something with their body, and both require listening, whether you're listening to words or listening to a nonverbal cue. How that's a practice. Oh my gosh. Okay. We just got on stage and she leaned over to me and said, Mom, I can't believe that you're home late. You said Spanish classes were going to be over at 6 and now it's 9 o'clock. Whoa, you just gave me a lot of information. Okay, now I'm your mom. I'm your mom who apparently either teaches or takes Spanish classes. You're supposed to be home at 6, which might mean maybe I skipped making dinner. So now it's 9. So there's something happening there. Right. So, I mean, and that was a complex example, but there's so much there. So how do you listen to those cues and then decide which way you're going to go based on what you hear? So there's a lot of kind of either performative focused improv exercises that are like that one, or games that are more like the one that you and I played, which are more just two people having a discussion and then reflecting back to each other based on what they heard.
Thank you so much for this. For sharing this. And as you spoke, I just realized where our urge for interrupting might come from. Because the moment where it's basically putting control onto someone. If you're saying something and then I want to add, as you said, add my piece of what's most important to me. So interrupting means I don't allow you to maybe go into a different direction. And then suddenly I have to realize that what I wanted to share has nothing to do suddenly. And then I cannot drop that. So I'd better interrupt you now to take back control over the direction, which is the exact opposite of improv. And then what a cool exercise could it be and I don't even mean a workshop exercise, but a real life exercise. What if next time when we're in a conversation with our friends or colleagues, our own game with ourselves is to keep them speaking as long as possible. So how can we just extend their contribution, their speaking time to the absolute maximum instead of making it a dialogue and seeing just observing what changes if we either look at someone and give them permission to speak longer or only ask questions to make them speak longer.
I love that. That reminds me of, are you familiar with Michael Bungay Stanier, who's written a couple of books? Sorry, you might have to edit out that pause. I was getting a book, but he's written 2 books. This is The Coaching Habit.
Yes, I read that. It is fantastic.
Fantastic.
Absolutely recommendable. Yes.
Yep, this one's amazing. And then he has another one I haven't read yet, but it's called the Habit. The Advice.
The Advice Trap. Is it
the Advice Trap?
Yes.
And it talks all about this. And one thing in this book, The Coaching Habit, that he mentions is he calls it the question, AWE. And the question is simple. It is, and what else? Oh, what else? Right? And whether you say those words, and what else, or you just say, is there more? Tell me more. Guaranteed, we have a lot to say. We just need to be given that invitation, right? And especially when you're looking for quote unquote advice, or you come to somebody for some guidance, oftentimes we know the answer, right? And that's what he talks about specifically in here is, it's called the coaching habit for a reason, because if you come to me and say, oh my gosh, Shannon, I don't know what to do. I can't figure out how to market my next course. And, I'm just totally stuck and I need your help. I bet you that if I just ask you, well, why don't you tell me about what you've done so far? Da, 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 da. Okay. And what else? Well, I've done this and this and this. And if I just keep asking you questions that are different variations of my curiosity, whether it be and what else, or whether it be the way my body language is saying, tell me more. I mean, I'm like almost 100% sure you're going to come around to your own conclusion.
Yeah.
And then maybe there's a time where I finally say, what do you need from me? Right. I'm happy to give you some advice, or I'm happy to listen, right? And to check in rather than just jumping to advice, because that's what this is what Bungay Stanier calls the advice monster. Because we just go, I got my advice and I'm going to stick it on you. And it's not always what's needed.
Especially not for the person asking for advice. I think very often it's what's needed to ourselves. It's the advice we should. I rarely use the word should, but I think it is the advice we should give ourselves.
Mm-hmm. That's okay. That's a positive use of the word should. I'm the same way. I'm consciously trying to take that word out of my vocabulary because it's so dangerous.
Yeah. Yeah. They're the two words. You mentioned the but before. I consciously try, every time I say but, I have this millisecond to think, can I replace it by an and? Awesome. And in most of the cases, I just do, and sometimes it doesn't fit. I'm like, okay, it's better to have an and too much than a but too much.
Exactly. Another one that came up recently was the word try, which, yeah, I pulled together some dear friends of mine once a month, and we just get on a Zoom call and I facilitate this great discussion. And we went around the room. I forget what the prompt was, but anyway, it was like a declaration kind of a moment. And somebody said, I will try to, whatever it was. My declaration is, I'm going to try to be a better XYZ.
That's not a declaration.
I know. And I said, I love it. Why don't you try to take out the word try? And then it's like, I am a better friend to my, whatever the thing was. Ooh. So that word, yeah. Oh my God. And you could see, she could feel it in her body, right? It's like an embodied experience to take out that word try.
I love it. I haven't thought of the word try and its impact. Let me try that for a while. I will take out try for an entire week of my vocabulary and see where it goes.
Me
Without
too.
trying, just doing.
Okay, we're in it together, Miriam. I'll do that too, because it's definitely a practice for me. Yeah.
Leave out try for 1 week. Now it's my turn to write it down.
I'm going to write it down too. Awesome.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So what's coming up for you now? What's in the pipeline? What keeps you busy? What makes you happy these days?
I love that question. Well, what keeps me busy is, I have a family. I've got 2 kids, so that just is what it is in all the best ways and all the most challenging ways, right? At the same time. Work-wise and, in terms of my practice, I'm very much in business development. And when I say that though, it's my approach to business development and marketing and all of that is just 200% relational. So it's coffees and it's meeting new people and it's putting myself in places and spaces that I haven't been before and putting content out and reading other people's content, and which can be a full-time job. So trying to there it is. I said it.
Good catch.
So yeah. So it's work, and it makes me really happy. I really, this whole being an entrepreneur thing, despite its ups and downs and pitfalls and things, and it just really brings me joy. It just lights me up, makes me feel alive. I feel totally aligned with what I'm supposed to be doing and what I'm meant to do. Logistically, or, when it comes to what things that I'm doing, I have a training coming up in October with a nonprofit organization I've done some work with, who I love. They're called the Center for Volunteer and Nonprofit Leadership, and they're based here in California. I've got, fingers crossed, a couple of sales kickoffs that I'm going to do in the new year. Hopefully we can think about COVID being a little bit behind us and gather together in real life and with other people in a room. I'm going to be putting out a pre-recorded course about design and facilitation. So I just need to sit down and start anywhere. I haven't started. I just have to start, and I know it will snowball, but it's one of those things I need to sit down and do it. And then the next one will come. And that's how that goes, right?
True.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
And you have a big conference coming up, right?
Yeah. November, 6 weeks.
Wow.
Festival.
Amazing.
Yeah. The program is live now. The website isn't yet. Well, the lineup on the website as well. And it will all be fine.
It will.
It always takes longer. And then it's just embracing that. And by stressing out, it doesn't go faster.
Yeah. Oh boy, isn't that a reminder? Talk about control. My stress does not control the speed of this getting done.
I had this funny moment recently. I call them wisdom circle. There are a group of 5 of former festival guests and podcast guests who every other week come together to support me. So to help me taking decisions and to think. And it's really great. And last week I had an epiphany, and I turned up to the call and I said, you know what? I think I have a control issue. And they all collectively started to laugh out loud. It's like, what? You knew it before? Nobody did.
Wait, you mean they were all kind of like, yeah.
I know that, Miriam. Good that you realize now.
Oh my God, that's so funny. That's so funny. I love that so much.
So, in my own mind, I always thought that I'm so good with uncertainty and I can let go of control. And no. It's a very scary
Love that. Yeah. Yeah. That reminds, do you know who Adam Grant is?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. He did a delightful interview on the Tim Ferriss show podcast. Yep. It's a great one if you want to look it up, and it's a great one. And he talks about how, I think it's like once a year or maybe twice a year. I hope I'm saying this right, but I think what he does is he reaches out to an email list of, a short list of people that he trusts. And some of them are his students. And he says, I forget what he says, but the idea is, tell me what my blind spots are. And so he reaches out to these people and he asks, quite literally, please tell me what I can't see, because I am just moving through this world thinking I've got it all covered. And yet somebody will come along and say, you have control issues, Miriam.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
it's just as important to have a cheering squad.
Yeah.
Sorry, I interrupted you. No, go ahead. What'd you say?
I was just thinking that this is something that we would all benefit from doing once per year, reaching out to maybe a wider circle even and ask, okay, tell me my blind spots, bring it on.
Yep. Yep.
Thank you. And I interrupted you.
No. No, I think we were kind of saying the same thing and giggling about our agreement around that, and just that would be helpful. Yeah. Oh, I know what I was saying. It's just as important to have a cheering squad as it is to have like a truth bomb squad, right? Tell me what is really happening here because I can't see it.
And if it's coming from a place of love and support and trust, then yeah, it can be as enlivening.
Well done. Well done. This has been so delightful today.
Thank you so much for taking the time. If someone made it so far, and surely their mind is wandering and it's difficult to listen to really listen to such a long podcast episode, what would you like them to walk away with? The one thing to remember?
The one thing to remember, I'd say, is to notice more, to consciously put into practice the ability to see the offers. Because they're everywhere. The offer is the woman who's bagging your groceries who needs a compliment, right? The offer is your mother-in-law when her shoulders are slumped because she's down and out, right? They're everywhere. And if we can lean into seeing those offers and just kind of get clear on what those offers are asking of us from a human level, whether it's a question or a compliment or a pat on the back or a hug. We just need that. We need humanity. We need to lean into our humanity. There's so much divisiveness. So what are they? Are they playful? Are they touching? Are they constructive? What are they? Look for them, notice them, and then do what's needed.
Wonderful. Thank you for the reminder. And thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
At the end of the podcast jingle.